Bienvenido a un nuevo contenido de Uninorte Co. No olvides suscribirte a nuestro canal.
Muy buenas tardes. En nombre de la Quinta Cátedra Global, les damos una muy cordial bienvenida a la charla Developing Cultural Identity Through Online International Learning, para la cual contamos con la especial participación de la maestra Gloria Angélica Ortiz Barroso, de la Universidad Popular Autónoma del Estado de Puebla, y del maestro Rafael Márquez Flores, también de la Universidad Popular Autónoma del Estado de Puebla. Gloria Ortiz es directora de la licenciatura en Enseñanza y Diversidad Cultural de la Universidad Popular Autónoma del Estado de Puebla, con licenciatura en Lenguas Modernas con terminal en Docencia en Inglés por la Benemérita Universidad Autónoma de Puebla. Tiene una maestría en la enseñanza de inglés con el título ad honorem de la misma institución. Ha trabajado en la UPAEP desde el año 2006, primero como profesora y ahora profesora hora clase, y desde el 2011 como catedrática a tiempo completo. Su trabajo de docente desde hace 15 años incluye experiencia como catedrática en inglés, italiano, español y materias de contenido en educación superior, así como español para extranjeros en Robbinsdale Spanish Immersion en Minnesota, Estados Unidos. Rafael Márquez es profesor de tiempo completo de la UPAEP de la licenciatura en Lenguas, Enseñanza y Diversidad Cultural, licenciado en Lenguas Modernas, maestro de Tecnología en la Educación, profesor y facilitador en la línea del Centro de Autoaprendizaje de la BUAP, creador y promotor de COIL con universidades internacionales, miembro de Educal e investigador en los campos de TESOL y COIL. A continuación los dejamos con los maestros Gloria y Rafael. Bienvenidos, maestros.
Gracias, bienvenidos.
Gracias. Okay, well, let's start. Thank you for the introduction and welcome to this presentation. Today, we're going to talk about developing cultural identity through online international learning. And next one, please. Okay, those are the topics that we are going to cover in this presentation. We're going to talk about COIL, culture, identity, cultural awareness, and finally, we are going to tell us our experience doing this COIL. So before to start, I would like to reflect on this aspect. What do students need? How will the world of tomorrow look like? Well, we don't know for sure, but we can foresee it will be complex, intercultural, and diverse. Then, for that reason, we need to prepare students to adapt to these global changes with a strong and flexible identity to be able to interact in a multicultural environment. So for that reason, we are going to explain what is a COIL first, right? In order to accomplish this purpose. So please, next. Okay, thank you. Well, here we have a definition, but before to read the definition, I would like to say that some of you perhaps know COIL with other names. Sometimes they are called virtual exchanges or virtual collaborations. You can find different names. But here we have a definition, and I think this is the definition that I like the most, because it's a definition of SUNY, the State University of New York, that it's a pioneer in this methodology. And it mentions that collaborative online international learning, COIL, is an approach that brings students and professors together across cultures to learn, discuss, and collaborate as part of their class. professor's partner to design the experience, and a student's partner to complete the activities designed. COIL becomes part of the class, enabling all students to have a significant intercultural experience within the course of the study. So, as you notice here, one of the intention or one of the main purpose of this methodology, it's let not just the students but also the teachers these allow this discussion and collaboration in this case in an international way that I think that it's one of the most main characteristics of these methodologies. Well, talking about characteristics, here we have some of the most relevant. By the way, here we have some pictures about the last coil that our students did. Well, in the characteristics, we can find that these coils, these projects, this methodology can be created in any discipline. And here we can find something interesting because interdisciplinary coils most of the times have great results. It's important to mention that when we have an interdisciplinary coil, we are adding people or students from different fields and they create something along these coils. So most of the times these coils are really they have a great content at the end of this project. Also, we have encouraged active student learning and teamwork. And this is important because along the coil, the work it's done mainly by the students. So they have to work and collaborate in teams, international teams. And so for that reason, we allow these intercultural encounters that it's related with the next characteristic, include an emphasis on cross-cultural interactions and understanding. So here we can mention that it's important not just the work that they are doing, the academic work, but also they are learning different aspects of the culture of the international partners, right? So at the same time that they are working in an academic aspect, they are also sharing different cultural elements of their own culture. So that's the great thing of these coils. Also, they can be 5 to 15 weeks long. In this case, our coil, the experience that we are going to share, lasted 5 weeks. But most of the times, this is enough time for doing a great project. Later, we have graded activities. Here, it's a main aspect of the coil that it's not just to do a project because you found an international partner and you have to do something. No, most of the times the topics that the students work in this coil is related with the program that they have in their own universities. So for that reason, the coil it's integrated into the evaluation of the course. So for that reason, we need to grade those coils, and in some way, this can be or can be motivated for the students that they not just have to participate, they also have to do it because they are going to be evaluated in their own course. And finally, I think this is uh, 50% of the coil, I think, it's the technological resources. We can't plan a coil without consider technology. It's important to have platforms or look for suitable technological tools in order to carry out this coil. And also, it's important that the teacher involved in the use of these technological resources or platforms, because if at some point the students had questions, or if one student had an issue with a technological with the technological resource or with the platform, well, it's important that the teacher knows how to solve the problem. Sometimes we have technical support in different universities, and sometimes we don't have it, right? So for that reason, I think it's crucial that the teachers involved in the platforms or in the technological resource that they are going to use in order to master these tools. So we have a lot of advantages doing this kind of coils. Well, next, please. Okay, well, before we have here a visual explanation of this coil. In this resource, we have a course A that could be an institution B, for example, in Mexico, and we have course X, and we have an institution Y, right? For example, Africa or South Africa. Language C, we have Spanish, and language Z, we have English, right, or African. And here we can decide that if we have to do this coil in our same discipline, in the same discipline, or if we are going to do it in an interdisciplinary way. And later we have the coil collaboration, that it's the most substantial part of the methodology. Here, the students have to collaborate. They have to create different tasks. They have to do their projects. They have to comment. They have to discuss. And finally, we have the evaluation. But all this, it's not possible if we don't have the correct planning. So for that reason, planning, it's in the middle of those two elements. And this is the part that the teachers should do. In our case, we spent like 3 or 4 months before this coil. We were discussing with our international partners, with the teachers from the other country. We were trying to find some activities that we could do in our courses, trying to identify topics that could be relevant for both uh, courses, for both universities. So this is the planning and design of the coin. Okay, so in the next one, we have the culture or the cultural aspect. Here, it's important to mention that we have a variety of concepts. How would you define culture? What is culture for you? Are you proud of your culture? Those are some questions that perhaps we asked our students before to start the coil, because this is related with the next part. So please, in the next slide, we find some definitions of cultures, of culture. We can find a lot of definitions on the internet. Here are some of them: a set of values, beliefs, customs, and behaviors shared by a community. An individual responds to these behaviors appropriately. Culture is a cultivated system of symbolic resources shared by a group of people. Well, and here we have this iceberg model. The intention of the coil, it's not just to see the tip of the iceberg, right? That it's the elements that we can see in any culture, right? The way that they dress, the music perhaps that they listen to. We find elements that we can identify in any culture. But the intention of these coils, right, that we did, it was try to encourage to develop certain abilities in culture. So we tried to find in some way that our students discover by their own different elements that are deeper in this iceberg. So for that reason, we have this model. Please, next one. So for that reason, we need to develop certain competences, in this case, the cultural competence. Cultural competence is known as a multidimensional construct, but it typically refers to a person's cultural sensitivity or attitudes, cultural awareness, and cultural knowledge and skills. And the other uh, element that we have to analyze its cultural identity. And in this part, the self-conception and self-perception of the students in this coil, it's important because they are going to have an intercultural encounter. So they in some way have to negotiate, co-create, reinforce, or challenge their own identities. So for that reason, it's important to learn about identities. In the next slide, uh, Angie is going to explain it.
Yes, as Rafa has mentioned, a coil actually embraces these issues about culture because we place students in different situations in which they have to interact with different cultures. So through these, we can improve cultural awareness, but also we can improve this identity awareness. So, what is identity? We are actually, as human beings, we like to belong. We like to be part of a team, be part of a group, and we like this feeling of membership. So we form groups with other people because we need to satisfy this need for membership. So we actually feel proud of saying things such as, for example, I am Mexican, or I am Latin, I am a teacher, because those statements are actually part of what our identity is. So for example, we as human beings, as we saw before with the definitions of culture, culture is, it's many things that are involved. We have these symbolic resources that are part of our culture. So for example, if I said something such as I am Mexican, I have certain things implied in there, but I can go deeper because, for example, I can say that I am from Puebla, so I can say that I am Poblana, and that means something different even in the same Mexican culture, because that means that I have a different type of gastronomy, for example, from the north or the south of Mexico, or also that my accent, it's different from this accent in Yucatan or the accent in Veracruz. So those things are related, and those differences and experiences that I have had as an individual and that everybody has had are the ones shaping our identity. Because identity can be seen as this entirety of how we as individuals view and perceive ourselves. Okay, and that makes us unique. So in this part, it's where we talk a little bit about these identity webs. So what is an identity web? It's actually everything that we have that makes us unique. For example, we have the individual at the center. And then how are we going to construct our identity? Well, it's going to be defined probably by the region in which we were born, the ethnicity we have, the gender, age, social class, but everything that is affecting us, every decision we make, every experience we have, it's going to shape that identity. The media we see in, the roles that we take, the culture in which we are, the education we have, the religion, the work, the kind of work we have. So everything is it's gonna shape that identity in order to make us unique. So why is it important to have cultural awareness of our culture? Why is it important that we know what are part of these things or these symbolic resources that makes us unique? Well, when we interact with people from different cultures, we usually understand the differences because we see certain things that are different from the things we do or the beliefs we have, but also we see similarities. For example, I have in here some tacos, and I am pretty sure that everybody in Mexico has this special way of eating a taco that would be something we hold it like this with a pinky like high, because we cover or we fold the tortilla so the sauce doesn't come out. So that is something like too Mexican, and we know it. Nobody has taught anybody how to hold a taco, but we just learn it because we are immersed in that culture. So, what is cultural awareness? Cultural awareness is this understanding of cultures, understanding these values, these beliefs, the languages that we have, and how they are different from the ones we have. So when we are in different situations in which we interact with people from other cultures, it's when we are going to develop this cultural awareness. So that means that we are gonna appreciate that each culture depends on the other one. Also, we're gonna develop mutual respect and connection across cultures. We're gonna develop inclusion, that now it's like a fashion term, so we can develop that if we are cultural aware. And also, it's going to develop understanding. That's why this is so important. So how can we develop cultural awareness in our classes? Well, there are 4 levels for cultural awareness. So we have blindness, we have sensitivity, competence, proficiency. So how can we develop that? The first one, blindness, it's when we are unconscious, but also we are incompetent. So that means that we are unaware of cultural differences. We don't know anything. We haven't realized about that. We make cultural mistakes due to these things. And also we misinterpret behavior because we are not able to see or to comprehend this difference. We're unconscious. The second level is sensitivity. So that means that we are conscious, but we are incompetent, okay? So now we realize that there are differences between cultures, between how people believe or behave or any symbolic resource we have. But we understand a little bit of these differences, and we don't know how to react to them. In the third level of cultural awareness, we have competence. So that means that we are conscious and we are competent. Okay, we're conscious and we have competence. So we know these cultural differences exist, and we are paying attention on how to behave so we don't misinterpret or misunderstand certain behaviors, or also we don't make a cultural mistake. And finally, in the proficiency one, it's when we are unconscious, because now we know how to react. We don't need to be careful about it. We don't need to think about, oh, I can't say this because this is the culture, or I should be silent because this culture requires me to do that. No, we know how to act, and it's like unconscious for us as it is in our culture, and we are competent, okay? So how can we develop these levels of cultural awareness? Well, the first level, it's remains in when we are tourists in a different country, and in textbooks or in magazines, or even with movies and videos. So everything is like exotic for us. It surprises us, but we don't comprehend a lot. The second one, that is the one that we are trying to reach with this online international learning, is this one. It's to place students in conflict situations because they are actually working with people from other countries. So they have to do a project together. Well, actually, they have to do 4 projects together and a final one. So they have to solve situations, they have to interact, they have to communicate. So they are placed in these conflict situations, and then they have these feelings of something that could be unbelievable or something that could be frustrating or irrational. But this takes them to the third level, that is awareness. So they start becoming aware of the differences, the similarities, and aware of their own culture. So this is we can take students from level 1 of cultural awareness to level 3 through these practices of online international learning. So how do we do it, and what are the results that we get that we got from this experience?
Okay, so in this case, our experience, we created a coil with 2 different groups at UPAEP, and we found 2 other different groups at an international university. So that means that we have 2 different uh, groups, right? But they were doing the same activities, right? So we asked before to start the coil some about some perceptions of the students that they have on their international partners. So please, in the next one. Okay, so we start with some positive perceptions that perhaps our Mexican students have about their international partners. So, as we can see in both groups, they share the same expectations, right? They thought that their international partners were punctual, that they were commitment or committed students, that they were collaborative. So in the second group, we find the same results. They thought that they were punctual, committed, and collaboration, right? We have also responsibility. So that was the perception before the coil. But after the coil, we can see that those perceptions, these positive perceptions, didn't change a lot. Actually, in the first group, we have that they change. Is instead of having punctual, the punctual perception as the first one, we have a positive attitude, collaboration, and responsibility. They keep in the same way. So in the second group, we have the same. We have commitment, they have punctuality, and they have collaboration. Responsibility is another one. So we can see that the perception, the positive perception that our Mexicans students have about their international partners, well, it didn't change a lot. But now let's check the negative perceptions. And here we can notice something interesting. Before to start the coil, our students thought that their international partners were with a negative attitude, with a lack of patience, some of them lack of collaboration. So it contrasts with the previous one. And in the second one, they mention close-minded as the first one. They also mention lack of patience and negative attitude. So we have some coincidences. That was our Mexican students thought before the coil, but after the coil, the perception, the negative perception of the students changed radically, right? So, for example, here in both groups, we have that they didn't find any any negative perception. In both groups, we have one student that mentioned, 1 or 2 students that they mentioned different negative attitudes like lack of collaboration, or lack of responsibility or lack of commitment, because they experience a particular um, situation in their international teams, in which they didn't have enough communication in order to accomplish their respective tasks that they have. So for that reason, they didn't have uh, this perception of the coil. The rest of the teams, they worked in a really good way. They had a lot of communication. They did different video calls. They used different resources, technological resources. So their work was really well. But those students who didn't have enough communication, well, we can see that the negative perception didn't change. And the next one. Mhm.
Yes. Now, we also have, through this survey, we also got some results about raising cultural awareness. So, what were the results that we got? We had in the survey, we had some questions that were open, and also we have closed questions, just yes or no questions, or we like in the previous one with the options. But in the open ones, we could analyze some of these raising cultural awareness results. So, for example, in the blue one, we have the things that they found similar between the Mexican culture and the international culture that was in this coil. And in the red one, we have the differences. So all of those things, the similarities and the differences, are proof of this cultural awareness because students started paying attention and reflecting about their own culture, their own practices, their own beliefs, and make comparisons about them. So we have in here, for example, in the blue one, they found a lot of coincidence with the street food. So they found that in both countries, street food is part of the culture that are used to it in the street. Even with the pandemic, it's something that didn't affect. So that is part of the culture. They feel comfortable eating on the street. So probably if we have an international experience with another country, that's going to change. But that is something they share. Also, they found out that both cultures are close to family. So family, it's important. The role of everybody in the family, it's a very important part of their identity. And it is also part of this culture of costumes and celebrations. Both cultures were similar on having a lot of customs and a lot of celebrations, and also gastronomy. They mentioned a lot of gastronomy. Uh, and in this one, it was very particular because we had that they shared gastronomy variety because both are like big countries with different climates. So we have, I don't know, the beach, we have the forest. So they could also see this variety of gastronomy because of the region, but also some of them even reflect on their identity as Mexicans because, for example, some of them mentioned that it was great to see the differences between the gastronomy that they have because they were from the north of the country and the gastronomy that the other one had because it was from the south of the country. And it's the same country, both of them were Mexicans, but they were finding these differences. And also they both found that these two countries share these senses of solidarity and kindness. Now, in the red ones, in the differences, for example, our students realize that here now we are losing this respect to adults. Now, in the past, 20 years ago, people used to address older people like with the usted form in Spanish instead of the tú form. Now it's disappearing. So they notice that in the other country, they still have this respect for elderly people. Also, they notice that the academic pressure, it was different. It's harder in the other country than in Mexico, or at least that's what they reflect in this one. And something they talk a lot was social networks, because here in Mexico, they notice that they are now using a lot of social networking but in the other country, they don't use those networks. They have to switch. If they wanted to interact, they have to look for different resources because they couldn't use the same resources or technological resources they are used to use here in Mexico, because in their country they weren't allowed, so they had to change. Also, they notice, for example, this one, Planned Parenthood, I haven't thought about it, but many of them mentioned this, that in the other country they have this sense of responsibility, of the responsibility that bringing a child to the world means when you are young. So they are very responsible with this Planned Parenthood. While here in Mexico, for example, we have a lot of teenagers having kids. So that is something that they found, and they mentioned that that is cultural. Also, lack of physical activities in here, more freedom of opinion in Mexico, and the differences in meal timing. So another thing that was interesting of these findings was this question. We actually asked the question, did you discover something of your own culture while you were interacting with your international peers? And we found this. So those are quotes from them as they wrote them. We didn't change anything. We just underlined what we wanted to emphasize. So, for example, something that we saw in here was this belonging sense, or this membership of a group sense that they wanted to state, because we can see the use of the nosotros in Spanish, the we, the use of we. We have, for example, somos, we have tenemos, somos, okay? So even if they say, I realize, they would say something like, I realize that we are this way. So that is part of this cultural awareness. They were paying attention to those things that they share with other Mexicans, but that were different from the international culture they were interacting with. So, for example, we have in here, somos un país muy rico en costumbres. So in this one, we have this membership, identity discourse part in here, and talking about costumes and traditions. We also have the technology in here. For example, it says, no era consciente, I, of the freedom that we have, nosotros, okay? So we have I and we, okay? Because I am part of this group. We have in here the same technology, we are, and lenguaje corporal. This is something that I found very interesting because I haven't noticed that, okay? They notice that we as Mexicans use a lot of gestures and a lot of, we move a lot of our hands. So I don't know if every single culture does that, or probably Latins will do that. I haven't seen that, but they realize this. So for example, we have in here the same, descubrí, I discovered that Mexicans like. So Mexicans, he's part of that culture, okay? Nos gusta interactuar. Then we have, somos más extrovertidos, we are. En cuanto a las costumbres alimenticias, me di cuenta de que nuestra comida es muy variada. Our food. So, in this kind of discourse, we can see that they are actually using this cultural awareness to state that they are part of a group, because they have this belonging feeling in here. Utilizamos mucho las manos cuando hablamos. Nuestra cultura hace demasiados gestos y movimientos corporales. Uso mucho las manos. Nuestra cultura está llena de drama. Utilizamos mucha comunicación no verbal. So I think that they noticed something with the communication with other culture, and probably they didn't move a lot their hands or something, but the Mexicans once did. So I think that probably we do that. So what are the results? What should we do this thing of collaborative online international learning, or COILS? Well, the first advantage of it is that we can overcome stereotypes. As we saw in the previous survey about the negative aspects that we asked about the culture, the ones that they chose because they thought that their students were going to be that way, all of them disappeared. when they work with them and spend a month and a week working with these people, they realize that they are not that way, that was just a stereotype they had, and they just overcome that. So that's a good thing. The second one is that they can make connections. They make connections between cultures, between their own culture and the culture that they are interacting with, but also they make connections about their own culture, because they also have a national pair. They were working, we have around 50 teams, and each team was formed by 2 international students and 2 Mexican students. So they have also this part. They have the national collaboration with 1 and the international collaboration with 2, and they were different teams. Also, they can, instead of seeing differences as a barrier, they can embrace the differences, and they can see why differences make us unique and make us rich. Also, they can develop intercultural competence as well as intercultural communication, because we are placing them with these conflict situations because of the culture, because they have to interact. And finally, the best of all is that we can raise cultural awareness and identity. So we know that being culturally aware is respecting others' cultures as well as our own. And I think it's our job as teachers to give them the best academic life as possible as we can. So if we can, for example, have different experiences, cultural experiences, while they are in the university, because some of them cannot move outside, some of them cannot go into an exchange program, so they can have these experiences here at home through a computer. So if we can do that, and we can bring different cultures to our classes, they are gonna end the university and they are gonna graduate with a lot of cultural competence and cultural awareness, and their identity, it's gonna be very, very strong. So please, if you would like to keep in touch with us, just write to us. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias a nuestros invitados especiales por su participación y a todos los asistentes por acompañarnos a esta sesión de Cátedra Global. Los invitamos a seguir conectados a la programación de Cátedra Global virtual. Asimismo, los invitamos a que nos sigan en Instagram como Uninorte Global y compartan su experiencia durante Cátedra Global virtual. ¡Feliz tarde!
Los siguientes contenidos de Uninorte Co te pueden interesar. No olvides suscribirte a nuestro canal.